The NBA regular season schedule has officially passed the midway point of February, and there have been a number of players and teams that have surprised in a big way to this point in the year after entering the 2018-19 campaign with a great deal of hope that this could be the year that their respective franchises take the next step and move closer to becoming a true contender for a title. While there is still a number of games that are left to be played before the playoff matchups are finalized and we know what each postseason qualifier's path to a title would look like, we have played enough games at this point in time to know who are the true contenders and which teams are still merely pretenders in the race to knock off the Golden State Warriors. With that being the case, Red Forgrave of CBS Sports has put together his latest batch of NBA Power Rankings for fans to enjoy, and this week's theme is focused on predictions for the second half of the season. In case you missed this very big storyline right before the All-Star break, the Knicks won. After 18 losses in a row, they beat the Hawks last week, their first win since Jan. 4. Should we expect more of those? Quite possibly. Mark my word, Dennis Smith Jr. is going to win some games for the tanking Knicks. They have to stay in the bottom 3 to have the best odds for getting the No. 1 pick. The only things that matter for the Cavaliers the rest of this season is that youngsters like Colin Sexton and Cedi Osman continue to prove that they are valuable foundational pieces for this franchise moving forward. Heck, maybe Marquise Chris can prove that he's an actual NBA player. That would be an unlikely coup for the Cavs. DeAndre Ayton told me over All-Star Weekend that they're building something in Phoenix, and he expects them to be a playoff team within 2 or 3 years. I love the confidence. But what they need now is a paradox, to try to build a winning culture while continuing to lose, and therefore netting another high pick. They're certainly doing the losing thing right with a 15-game losing streak heading into All-Star break. The Bulls got better at the trade deadline when they added Otto Porter Jr., even though that contract makes little sense for where the Bulls currently are as a franchise. The team's injuries have hampered much of the growth and development we should have seen from the Bulls' youth this season. It's hard to imagine a scenario where the Bulls are any different by the end of this season than where they are right now, slightly better than the bottom 3 teams in the NBA, but not better than anyone else. Things in Atlanta are looking up with savvy team building by Travis Schlenk. John Collins is going to be an all-star sooner instead of later, and Trae Young's learning curve has been fast. The nice young core assembled in Atlanta should give this team a bit of separation for the bottom 4 teams on these rankings. It's fair to assume that this team is going to stop trying for Zion and go fully in the tank, though the impact tanking can have on a team's culture is very real. Does that mean Mike Conley will be shut down after the Grizzlies mind-bogglingly decided to keep him at the trade deadline? The Pistons quietly improved at the trade deadline as they acquired Thon Maker and Svi Mykhailiuk in a trade and signed Wayne Ellington off the buyout market. Blake Griffin has reinvented himself and is having a career year. But point guards are pretty important in basketball. And their lack of good point guard play is why the Pistons ought to miss the playoffs. For the next year at least, this will unquestionably be Bradley Beal's team. How will Beal react to the pressure on his shoulders? Or could the Wizards, now with Bobby Portis and Jabari Parker on the roster, and presumably with Dwight Howard to return soon, make a run at the playoffs? They are only 3 games out. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in New Orleans the remainder of this season? In the span of a few weeks, their franchise player demanded a trade, they flirted with the Lakers and others, before keeping him at the trade deadline. They traded away Nikola Mirotic, and then days after the deadline, they fired the general manager who was in charge of those moves. Will Anthony Davis play? Will the Pelicans tank? The Mavericks' 2019 first-round pick has top 5 protection. If the Mavericks finish outside the top 5, they'll send it to Atlanta for the Luka Doncic trade. The Mavericks currently have the 9th worst record in the NBA, that gives them a roughly 20% chance of their pick landing in the top 4, meaning they would keep it. If they decrease to the 6th worst record, their odds would be roughly 37%. I can't imagine Doncic has tanking in his DNA. Can the Heat go on a post-All-Star run and replicate 2 years ago? Well, they're due to get Goran Dragic back shortly after the All-Star break. That'll help, and their defense has been stellar, with the 6th best defensive rating in the NBA. Here's an interesting stat: the Hornets turn the ball over less than any team in the NBA. Of course this team can make the playoffs, but it will take a Herculean effort by Kemba Walker. This team just doesn't have enough talent surrounding Walker. Quietly, the Magic have won 5 in a row, the second longest streak in the NBA. One league source told me over All-Star Weekend that Markelle Fultz could thrive under the player development skills of Steve Clifford. This team has a really good shot at the playoffs, especially if Jonathan Isaac keeps playing the way he has this month. In fact, I'd bet on it. Remember, in Clifford's first season in Charlotte, that team went into the All-Star break at 23-30, then went 20-9 the rest of the way and made the playoffs. The Wolves could be fully healthy, finally, after the All-Star break. It hasn't been announced yet when Robert Covington is due back. If this team is healthy, I'd give them a real shot of making the playoffs. Remember that invigorating feeling around this team after the Jimmy Butler trade? They're only 4 games out of the playoffs right now. Wolves can make up that ground if they're healthy. If the Clippers make the playoffs, they lose their 2019 first-round pick to the Boston Celtics. If the Clippers miss the playoffs, they keep that pick. They're in 8th place now, in the playoffs by the slimmest of margins. This team is incentivized to lose now and then make some big-time moves in the off-season. Sleeper pick here: once Spencer Dinwiddie rejoins the lineup, a healthy Nets team separates itself from the bottom of the race for the final 3 playoff spots in the East and makes the playoffs comfortably. This is just a well-run franchise by Sean Marks with great coaching and a solid culture. The Lakers are now favored to miss the playoffs. What utter dysfunction has enveloped this team since LeBron got injured? Remember a year ago, when the young Lakers core, preaching patience, looked like it was really making progress? This team feels stuck in the mud. And yet, are you really going to bet against LeBron making the playoffs? I'm not. And a first-round series between LeBron's Lakers and the Warriors would be top-notch entertainment. Here's one more team that could do something impressive and make a second-half run. Harrison Barnes feels like an ideal fit here after being pressed into franchise player duty too often with Dallas. That was a sneaky, smart trade deadline acquisition. This is a great fan base, and deserves a playoff appearance with this young and fun team. Quietly, the Spurs have been sliding 8-7 over their past 15 games and hanging on to a playoff spot. Worse is their advanced stats. The Spurs, Greg Popovich's Spurs, ranked 29th in the NBA in defensive rating during that stretch. This team was living a charmed existence for a while, feasting off the mid-range and getting by with bad defense. We haven't had a Spurs-less playoffs since 1997. That might change this year. I can't explain it either, how the Pacers have gone 6-5 since Victor Oladipo's season-ending injury. I mean, I know it's because of their second-rated defense, and because Bojan Bogdanovic has been remarkable, averaging 19.7 points and shooting 41.2% from 3 over the past 13 games. But if this team can stay in the top 4 in the East for the rest of the season, I would be absolutely stunned. The Blazers got marginally better at, and then after, the trade deadline. I'm not sure if adding Rodney Hood and Enes Kanter changes this team's ceiling all that much. They're a good team that's often very good but never to be confused with a great, but they definitely got better. Last year, this team was only 1 game above .500 on January 15th, then Damian Lillard went absolutely bonkers with an MVP-level second half, and the Blazers finished 27-12. Clint Capella is scheduled to be back February 21. They've gone 9-6 without him. But how sustainable is this all-time heater that James Harden's been on? Kobe's right, that's not how you win in the NBA, and certainly not how you win championships. My biggest worry for the Rockets is that all the effort Harden's had to put out with the Rockets' injuries and lack of depth could spell trouble for his tired legs in the playoffs. Also, I'm not sure a team that plays this bad on defense, 25th in the NBA in defensive rating, can replicate its run to the cusp of the NBA Finals a year ago. Been telling you for months that the Jazz, who struggled for the first couple months of the season, would turn things around. And they have. Prediction: this team, which didn't make any big trade deadline moves and currently sitting in 6th place, will keep improving and end up hosting a first-round playoff series. They're only 2 games back from the 4th-place Trailblazers, and they have the second easiest remaining schedule in the NBA, per Tankathon.com. Maybe a break and some time away from each other will prove to be just what the doctor ordered. As much as the narrative around the Celtics has been underachievement and locker room dysfunction, they still have the 3rd highest net rating in the NBA, behind only the Milwaukee Bucks and Golden State Warriors. Like the Sixers, the Celtics have the potential for a huge second half. The Nuggets sit in 2nd place in the West despite non-stop injuries over the first 57 games of their season. How good will a healthy version of the Nuggets be? Really, really good. People are underselling the Nuggets in the playoffs. Seriously, how many people would pick the Nuggets right now to make the conference finals? But this team is so deep, with young legs and an utterly unique star in Nikola Jokic. I'm not picking them to go deep this year. But for the next 5 years, I'm not sure there's a team with more potential than these young guns. I asked an NBA source over All-Star Weekend which team in the West he'd slot behind the Warriors. He picked the Thunder, saying there isn't a team in the NBA that plays harder. I worry, though, that we might see the Thunder, currently in 3rd place, fall a bit in the West standings over the rest of the season with the NBA's most difficult remaining schedule, per Tankathon.com. I'm more fascinated by what the Sixers will become post-All-Star break than I am any other team. Tobias Harris is awesome. But incorporating a near all-star into a team that is already stacked with big stars like Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler may not be as easy as it looks on paper. The top non-Warriors tier in the NBA consists of somewhere between 6 and 9 teams: Toronto, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Boston, Denver, Oklahoma City, and perhaps Houston, Utah and Portland. Of all those teams, I think the Sixers have the greatest variance in possibilities for how they end this season. Bucks or Raptors? Who is the best in the East? Who knows? Throw the Sixers and Celtics into the conversation if you want, but I believe the Raptors and the Bucks are a cut above. I asked Bradley Beal over All-Star Weekend about what team he thinks has the best shot at beating the Warriors. He pinpointed the Raptors, and called the Marc Gasol trade the best, non-Wizards, deal of the trade deadline. He also predicted that the Warriors would not win another title. One other note: if you're betting on who will take first in the East, take the Raptors. They have the easiest remaining schedule in the NBA, per Tankathon.com. Want to make the case that the Bucks are actually the best team in the NBA this season? You'd be wrong, but you wouldn't be crazy. Will the Bucks be able to sustain their pace of having the NBA's top net rating, outscoring opponents by nearly 10 points per 100 possessions, through the rest of the season? Nikola Mirotic should make this team even more lethal. Amazing what a new coach can do with some innovative offensive thinking. I'm waiting for the Warriors to rip off a 15-game winning streak. Who knows what will happen this offseason, but there's a very real chance we could be looking at the final season of perhaps the greatest NBA dynasty of all time, as the Warriors' core ages, or as they leave for other teams. Since January 5th, the Warriors are 16-2. Is it a bummer that the NBA Finals again feels like a foregone conclusion? I guess. But enjoy this team's greatness while you can, because it won't last forever.